Is it on?
Yeah.
Okay, let me refresh the page here. All right.
Okay.
It's live. Hi everybody, we're here with Provo Mayor John Curtis, and it's an honor to have you. Thanks for letting us interview you.
Oh, of course, yeah.
And we're the New Conservative Movement. We're a bunch of Evan McMullen fans. And we're very engaged and excited about politics.
Good.
And about everything that's going on.
That's excellent, yeah.
So just first, you were Person of the Year for Utah Valley.
Yeah.
Very popular mayor. And just our audience knows, there's also a fund that I read about yesterday in Deseret News that they want you, somebody started a fund online to get you to run for Congress.
That's correct, yeah.
And how do you feel about that?
Well, I tell you, it's, I view it as very flattering. That somebody would feel that I'm qualified is a very flattering thing. My problem is that fundamentally, I feel like politicians too often look past the office that they're in, and that's not good. It's not good politics. And so I've tried really hard to just stay focused on being mayor. I have 9 months left. I owe it to my residents to just put my head down and work really hard. So I think that's my response is, thank you, I'm flattered. I've got a job to do. I want to finish it right. And that's one of the reasons I haven't kind of surfaced to say, oh yes, these are my plans.
So when the time comes, then maybe. But right now you're focused on...
Yeah, and there's another fundamental thing that politicians do. So politicians typically make a couple mistakes, right? We look past the office we're in, that's one, I mentioned that. The other is that we stay in politics too long. And this concept that we need to detox and become normal again. In a perfect world, I'd have some time back in the private sector to become normal again, if that makes sense.
Yeah. All right. Well, can everybody hear okay in the video?
Comments.
Okay.
Okay.
So
that could be good or bad, right?
So if you can hear just fine, just let us know right in the comments below. And if you have any questions, you can write in the comments too. All right, so I'm going to ask just a few questions about your experience as mayor.
Okay.
And then we have some questions that people in our group have already asked.
Okay, great. Great.
So first thing is, what principles of leadership have you learned from your time as mayor?
Yeah. I think one of the things I've learned is it's so critically important to elect people who are willing to make hard decisions. I think a lot of the problems we're having is because the politicians just want to give us the answers that we want to hear. They're not willing to say, I don't care if this costs me my vote, this is the right answer. I heard Ben McAdams, the Salt Lake County mayor, say that the other day on this homeless problem, and say what you want about the issue, whether he's right or wrong, but the fact that he's willing to say, I don't care if this costs me my next election, I think in my heart this is the right thing to do. We need more of that, and we need more politicians who are willing to do what they think is right and not really worry about the political consequences.
Definitely. And can you give an example of a time that you've had to do that?
Yeah, so
popular?
This thing about local politics is we are in people's lives, you know, in a big way. For example, one of the hardest things I do is put a road in because it's going through somebody's backyard or it's taking their property. And you can see throughout our city places where we've not had the courage to put a road in where it really should have been. And then it makes the whole city dysfunctional. And so a road that's been on the master plan needs to go in. And even if it is a problem for somebody it goes through their backyard, it was on the master plan when you moved in and bought that home, I'm sorry, I've got to put it in. And those are the types of hard decisions that I think politicians need to be willing to make.
Yeah, and people definitely like to see, I think the average person likes to see that they're leaders, that they aren't just trying to do what's popular, that they're trying to be genuine and do what's best for the city.
So not in every case, but in almost every case when I've been mayor, when I've done the hard thing, I've actually felt like I've gained more respect from my residents than before, and that they truly like that, they want that.
Well, I guess it's people that are informed and know, I guess, are more likely to,
Yeah, but
to
even
respect that.
I think even the ones who are not paying attention will look back and say, you know, well, I'll give you another example. I had iProvo when I came into office, and iProvo was a very large debt that the city had because we put in a fiber network throughout the city. And I remember telling, it was actually one of our city employees, that my message was that had been a mistake, and that it wasn't working the way we thought it should. And he looked at me and he said, "Oh, that feels so good just to hear the truth." Even though the truth he didn't like,
Mm-hmm.
but he just said, "Oh, it feels so good to hear the truth."
Yeah, it's refreshing.
Yeah.
All right, and this is to me personally, this is the most important issue, is leadership. So are there any other principles that you'd like to talk about that you've learned?
I think it's really important for elected leaders to have vision. Somebody has to be looking 20 years, 30 years, 50 years ahead and guiding the city or the county or the state or the country in that direction. And I think in the case of a mayor has to be looking 50 years ahead. And when you're making those decisions, don't make them just because they're hard, right? Make them because they lead the city to where they need to be 50 years from now. And then a leader needs to be able to motivate people to move in that direction. It's one thing if the leader's out saying, this is where we need to go, and nobody's behind them. So you need a leader who can see the future and then inspire people to follow them in that direction.
And that's actually one of our questions. And it's, in an ideal world, what does Provo look like in 2050?
So, you know, we actually have a document that's called Vision 2050.
Oh,
And
I didn't know.
Yeah, we have a physical document called Vision 2050. Interestingly, we first did it and it was called Vision 2030, and we did that in 2010. So we took a 20-year look into the future, and our biggest mistake was it wasn't far enough into the future. So we actually did and accomplished many things on that list, and now we wanted to do it again and look further into the future and say, what do we want Provo to look like in 2050? So we have a document that talks about issues like education, healthcare, transportation, mobility, neighborhoods, all of these critical things. And in each category, we've defined what we want to look like in 50 years. And what was the aha moment for me was that many of them dealt with quality of life issues. People wanted to make sure that in 50 years, this was a community that was a great place to raise a family, that was a comfortable and safe place. Those were the types of things that resonated in that 2050 view.
Great. Can Christina look on here?
There's no questions.
Okay, no questions yet.
Okay.
All right. So what's the most surprising thing you've learned as mayor?
Somebody asked me that just yesterday, so I have an answer ready for that. It took me a while to think about it. One of the problems with politics is that as an elected official, you don't get a chance to make a mistake. In the private sector, when I ran a business, we would make an occasional mistake. And I think it's healthy to not be perfect. If you're not, my mom used to tell me when I would go skiing, I would come home and brag that I didn't fall. And she would say, well, then you're not learning because you're not pushing yourself. And so I think, unfortunately, this bar is so high for an elected leader that you know, if I say something and it's misinterpreted, boy, people just, they want to kill
Especially with social media, anything gets out easily.
Yeah, and so this concept of you don't get to make a mistake.
Yeah.
You have to be 100% perfect. And it causes politicians to kind of build a wall and put up these protections. I wish we could allow them to make a mistake and not just jump on them and expect that they're always going to say the right thing in every circumstance all the time.
And I think that goes back to being genuine, authenticity.
Yeah. And so what happens is when we don't let them be that way, then they tend to build walls. And when they build walls, we sense that there are walls, so we try to break their walls down. And then the reaction is defensive. And I think it's just really great therapy to just say, no, this is who I am. I'm not perfect. And a wise politician will actually come show their warts before they're found. because I think human nature is they like that. They like somebody coming forward and saying, look, I've got this issue and I made a mistake.
Mm-hmm.
But they're so afraid to do that.
Yes, they are. And what's a mistake that you've made and a really valuable lesson that you've learned from it?
Well, the one that comes to mind is, as a city, we just went through a very, very difficult period of time with our chief of police. He was accused of a sexual assault, and I found myself in a very difficult position of taking allegations seriously and protecting the feelings of this woman. But they were still allegations, and so I felt like I needed to protect the reputation and the career of this chief. And those two things were impossible to do. I had to sacrifice one for the other. And as I went through that experience, I think I blew them both, if that makes sense. And because I was trying so hard to do both. And there were certain people that I didn't tell that this was going on because I wanted to get it resolved and find out if he had done it or not. And then those people felt quite disappointed that I had not included them. So those are the types of things that it was very difficult to navigate, and then knowing I had made mistakes. Now I will tell you, in this case, most people were very understanding and accepting of my apology when I acknowledged I could have done certain things better. But I don't think even going through that situation again today, I could have navigated it perfectly, even knowing what I know now.
You think that your apology was better than United CEO?
Yeah. So what a perfect example of trying to pretend we don't have a problem, right? I mean, clearly this is bad, but if the United CEO's first response would have been an apology and an ownership of this, and we'll fix it, it would have been a whole different problem than what he has today. Absolutely.
Yeah. One thing that I read in I think it was the Utah Valley article, is that you often respond to people's questions. If they message you or something, you respond with a video.
Yeah.
And so, do you get nervous posting? And how many times do you have to practice those videos, or is it just like one?
So it's a one-time take. And the reason for that was I'll get emails. I spend way too much time answering emails. Most people have chosen to communicate with me via email, which I appreciate. Some of those require a very detailed explanation. So if I sit down to write that email, it might take me 2 hours. But if I can flip on a video and record a response just like I'm talking to you, I can do that in 10 minutes. And so I do that, and I'll flip on the video and just say, hey, look, let me explain this to you. And then I don't have to worry about spelling. I don't have to worry about all those things. I can just talk and communicate with that individual directly on that point.
Yeah, you don't have to worry about perfect grammar either.
Yeah, it's just like you and I talking, and me giving you an answer versus saying, okay, I'd like that answer in writing. Well, that's going to go take me an hour, right? Because now it has to be perfect, because you'll show it to somebody else. I just want to make sure everything is perfect in that.
Well, I like that. I think that's really cool that you communicate directly with people. I really like that.
Yeah, it takes a lot of time, but I think in every case it's been worth it.
So we have a question from Colleen Van Noy.
Okay.
And her question is, what are ways people from opposing political parties can work together across party lines to improve the communities and the nation as a whole?
Well, thank you, Colleen, for the question. One of the things that's good and bad about our political system is parties. And parties, in my opinion, tend to polarize because the party has to win and be right. I have the luxury of serving in an elected office that is nonpartisan. And so I'm not, it's so much easier to pull stakeholders into the room without a political affiliation to find answers. So the first thing I would suggest is that people, as we come together and represent different political philosophies or parties, is that we put first and foremost this idea that it's more important to come to the right answer than it is to win. And I think if we did that, we could solve immigration, we could solve Social Security, we could solve You know, a lot of these very difficult things, but it gets too polarized by winning and losing. And so I would just hope we could come together with this concept of it's not about winning or losing, it's about finding the right answer.
Mm-hmm. And do you think this will come from eventually from the bottom up, from the people demanding it of their leaders, or do you think we'll one day get a leader who really changes the tone?
I think we need to hope for both. If we simply wait for that leader, we may be disappointed and never get anywhere. And I think one of the things I'm seeing in the political environment, and Evan McMullen, I think, is a great example, is this shift to people feeling like they have power, like they can do something, that they can make a change, and they don't need to wait for their elected officials. You mentioned this thing where somebody's trying to convince me to run.
Yeah.
That's a proactive thing that people are doing. I don't think we've seen things like that before. And I applaud people not waiting for a politician to come and say, vote for me, but to say, no, we're going to shape politics. We're going to start putting issues out there, and I think it's pretty cool, actually.
That's one thing that the new conservative movement is trying to do. Well, we're the grassroots new conservative movement, and we're trying to set up clubs around the country and just pick our own issues and our own candidates, our own people to support.
I just really applaud that, because you're not waiting for a politician to come up with the answer. And so I think it's very powerful.
Yeah, and like there's very few people who actually have experience.
Yeah.
Like I've never interviewed anybody before.
But that's good. I mean, you got to start, right?
Yeah.
And where do you start? Well, you start by doing one thing. And then, wow, that wasn't so bad, and you do another thing. And pretty soon, you look back and you say, wow, we've really accomplished something here.
Yeah. And actually, next week, we'll be interviewing Scott Howe, and he told me to say hi to you.
Tell Scott Howe I have a lot of respect for Scott.
Yeah, he said he's been really proud of you when he's as mayor.
Scott was a good mentor to me many years ago.
I have a question.
Oh, go ahead.
So, my question is, how do you coordinate with other government entities to accomplish something if it includes either one or multiple? For example, the ice skating rink.
Yeah. I will tell you, one of the great things about government in Utah is that we do better than any other state, in my opinion, of working well together. You get a room full of mayors together, and we will solve problems. They check their ego. They come with ideas. They're creative. They bring resources to the table. And one of the things about the ice skating rink that's unfortunate and different is it's the opposite of that. It's one entity saying, "Hey, we're gonna take our ball and go home, and we're not even gonna talk about it." And so I think we need, when that system breaks down, we need to go back and reinforce the fact that especially local government, has the ability to solve problems better than anything I've seen, and it's because most of those politicians are non-professional politicians, and they're coming with a sincere intent to solve problems. We meet once a month in the county as elected officials of mayors and county commission, and we do miraculous things with roads and these common threads through our community, and it's actually pretty inspiring. A great example is there's a unified transportation plan for Utah that spans county to county and region to region and interfaces. I'm told we're the only state in the United States that actually has a statewide plan like that, because so often entities have a hard time agreeing. And in Utah, I think we do a fabulous job with that.
Cool. So we have a question from Warren Robert Zeigler, and he said, how do we keep up on education with a teacher shortage?
So Warren, this is $1 million question, and let me tell you why. It's not just about education. It's how do conservatives deal with these issues that we're passionate about, but yet involve the role of government when as conservatives, we're trying to minimize the role of government. And I find one of the problems is that you can say education is so important that we should just move forward anyway with some of these things. But the problem is there's somebody right next to you saying, well, this issue is so important, we want government to do it. The ice sheet is a good example where we're saying, hey, this is really important, we can't let this fail. This is different, right? And so the government should do this. Now, all of that said, I will tell you personally that education to me is one of those things that government needs to do. And particularly in Utah, we need to step in and say, this is one of those things where we can't fail.
Mm-hmm.
I will tell you this, as mayor, when I'm trying to recruit a business to Provo, in 7 years, no one has ever once said to me, I'm not bringing my business here because your taxes are too high. But I hear all the time, I can't relocate here because there's not a strong enough workforce. And so educating a workforce is an economic development issue. So it's very, very broad. So there's a movement underway by Gail Miller and others that would dramatically change the infrastructure for how we compensate teachers. And I've only looked at it this much, but I've looked at it enough to say that we should all take a look at it, that we need to be willing to change the fundamental structure of how we're paying for education, because it's just not acceptable to fail in this category and to let our youth down. It's too important.
Why is the pay so low here? I mean,
Yeah.
I went to BYU. I know several people who have graduated there, and then they started as a teacher, and then they realized how low it is compared to all the other states. And some of them need second jobs.
I don't profess to be an expert in this, but I will tell you that at least a piece of it is that we have very large families. And so the tax burden for the Curtis family, we have 6 children.
Mm-hmm.
So the tax burden to educate those 6 children is much higher than another state when the average family has 2 or 2.5 children. And I'm not sure we've come to terms with that as a state to say, you know what, if I have 6 kids, my tax burden should really be 3 times that of somebody with 2 kids.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we have to be careful with that. We don't want to tax people by the number of kids they have. But it is a factor that it is more expensive to educate here in the state because we have more children.
Yeah, that's something that I definitely wish we could improve on in Utah. I think that should be a top priority. And we have another question from Ammon Gruel. He asked, what are the most important issues facing Utahns right now, and how can we come together to solve them?
Yeah. Let me be a little bit more specific, and then maybe we can go a little broader. The most challenging issue facing Utah County is growth. As a county, we're going to double in size in the next 20 years. So think about that for a minute. Utah County has 500,000 people. Salt Lake County has 1 million. In 20 years, we'll be as large as Salt Lake County. Well, do we have the infrastructure for that? Do we have the roads and the water and all of those things to support that? And how do you grow? How do you double in size without losing the quality of life issues, clean air, enough water, and all of those things? Do we really want to build twice as many roads in a city? So this is why I think it's important for city leaders to be looking 50 years ahead and saying, wow, we need to have solutions. I think they did that up in Salt Lake County with tracks. And before tracks was really needed, they were implementing tracks. Now you look at Salt Lake County today, and if you take away tracks, how many more roads do you need? How many more parking lots do you need? How much more pollution is added to the air without tracks? And so as a county, I think we've got to be very careful and make sure that we're looking ahead and thinking about twice as many people.
Is Utah County growing faster than Salt Lake County?
It is, yes.
Wow.
Yeah, Utah County is on fire. It's an amazing place to live. And the job market is so strong. And it's still reasonably affordable. But we have to be careful we don't lose that. That's part of that challenge to growth.
Yeah. All right. We have another question from Marjorie Bill Hutchins, and that's, what can Utah's elected officials do to lessen all the over-regulation that plagues Utah?
Marjorie, right? Yeah, Marjorie, great question. this is similar to the point that I just brought up about everybody has an issue that's important to them. And what happens with regulation is we all say, well, we don't want all of that regulation. Oh, but by the way, this issue is important to me and we want to regulate this one. It's okay to regulate this one. And those all add up. I think we should give a shout out to our state legislators who just eliminated safety inspections for vehicles. That's a huge regulation shift. And I do think our legislators are in tune with that. But the very nature of politics breeds regulations.
Mm-hmm.
And so to answer her question, I think the best thing that we can do is identify those regulations that truly are not needed. Some are needed. I think if you look back, for instance, on the seatbelt movement, the number of lives that have been saved are truly significant. Well, that's a pretty heavy regulation, but I think we need to do a better job of identifying those that don't really serve a significant purpose, and then elect leaders who will make hard decisions. Let me tell you another thing I think that influences regulations, and that's large donors. I think I see too often legislators influenced not by people but by donors. I wish our system was different. I wish they could get into office without a single donor. But I think the hard reality is that some people are influencing that process with donations.
Yeah, and that's one reason why so many people voted for our president, who we're not gonna talk about much. I didn't want to, but they thought he wasn't beholden to.
Yeah, and I tell you what, that's very attractive, right?
Yeah.
I'm going to get here without donations, and wow, that's very appealing.
Yeah, it is, apparently.
Yeah.
Do you think how does Utah compare to the other states in regulations, the amount of regulations?
Well, I think because we have such a conservative legislators, we're much better. My previous business was installing shooting ranges, and we would go to like the Northeast and install a shooting range and get killed on regulations. We would lose money on a job every time. If you go down to Las Vegas and do a convention and set up a booth, you spend massive amounts of money because you have to use their laborers and so my sense is that Utah would be on the better side of the regulations, and I think it's because we have a very conservative legislature.
Yeah, I'm from New Jersey, so
yeah, regulations, right?
So I can just say, from personal experience, anything that I've had to deal with the government here has been amazing.
Yeah.
Like the Provo DMV, I've been in there twice to register cars. I just walk right in, and like in New Jersey, you go and you just sit there.
Yeah.
It could take you hours.
So we installed
for
shooting
the
ranges in New Jersey, and we would have to pay 300% more in labor costs to put a range in up there than we would in Wyoming.
So I don't get why people complain about Utah
Yeah.
regulations and big government, because I mean it's much worse
Yeah.
in other places.
We have a question.
Okay, we got a question from
Brad.
How do we reduce
Partisanship.
in local politics?
Yeah.
We kind of talked about that a little bit.
I'll
so
touch
if you
on
wanna-
Brad may not have been listening, but Brad, I love the fact that in cities there are nonpartisan elections. So when I ran for mayor, I didn't declare a party, and therefore I get to govern the city based upon not what a party tells me, but what I think is best. And I think it's really important, those of us who have strong allegiances to parties, that's good, and I'm glad we have strong allegiances to parties, but that shouldn't come before principles, and that principles are more important than parties. And I feel like, unfortunately, sometimes we treat parties a little bit like a religion,
Mhm.
which is they can't be wrong. And I'm going to defend my party no matter what. And in reality, I don't care what party you belong to, it's not perfect. And so if you're fighting an issue based upon a party philosophy, I would say adjust that to a personal philosophy, and then fight for that personal philosophy. And if that aligns with the party, great. But I think the reality of it, there's very few of us that align 100% with the party. Yet will defend a party 100%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's a mistake, in my opinion.
Yep. Never had been any flaws.
Yeah. Principles are more important than parties.
Yeah, I mean, it's a major problem. People just get stuck in their little bubble. They have their own circle of friends, their own media, and their own party, and they just do not want to leave. And that's one thing that our movement, we want to help reduce.
Yeah, a party is not a religion. They make mistakes. Both political platforms, the major two parties, I struggle with certain things in their platforms.
Mm-hmm.
And
I also read that you are a conservative Republican, but you ran before as a Democrat.
yeah. Well, I don't know if we have enough time to.
Yeah.
I'll give you the short version of that.
Uh-huh.
So I lived out of state, and I came back, and I thought I was a conservative Republican, and I came back and found that I was a flaming liberal, right? And I'm joking a little bit by that, but that if you didn't adhere to these, these certain principles, that you were wrong. The other thing I found that wasn't right is the dominance of one party makes that party liberal. And that's not healthy for a party to be so overly dominant. Mm-hmm. And I felt like what really was needed in Utah were candidates that were aligned with Utah values running in both parties. So I said, well, I'll show people that a conservative guy can run as a Democrat. And I changed the Utah County Democratic platform. It was very conservative, and it was a disaster. Nobody listened to me, and it was a disaster.
Well, things are now fine now. So
yeah, and it was a good experience. And I met a lot of amazing people through that process. But that was my attempt, is to try to bring balance back into two parties, because I think two parties keep the political system honest.
Yeah. All right, we have one more question. We're out of time now, so just real quick.
Okay.
So we have from Sue Fritzler. Should I read the first one or the second one, Terry?
Up to you.
I'll take them both, unless they're hard to.
Okay.
Well, the first one you've kind of already answered.
Okay, so the second one.
And you've kind of already answered the second one.
Address. Yeah, so this second one was about education funding.
Yeah.
So I guess, is there anything else that you would like to say? She wants to know a little bit more about education funding. This is recorded, right, where they can go back and watch it? Yeah, so I'd refer back to that section where I think we went into pretty detail, but I would emphasize that we can't get this wrong. Mm-hmm. It's too important to make sure that we're funding education at the right level, and that we have the right type of education in our state. Yeah, and I think that one thing that leaders can do is educate the voters on how beneficial education is for the entire society.
Yeah.
Because people will live healthier, and they get better jobs, and they're more civically engaged.
And I'll just repeat this for her, because she's probably listening, and that is that I never get asked when a business is coming to Provo about our tax structure, but I'm always asked about our education as a business is considering the area. That matters to economic development.
It has so many benefits.
Yeah.
Just,
we have another. Sean Johansson, would you ever consider running for Utah governor? Which kind of goes into the other.
Yeah, thank you, Sean. It's a compliment that you would ask the question. I have a lot of respect for our current governor, and his term will be up in a couple of years. And I've loved being mayor, and so I haven't ruled out running for another elected office. But I also want to be the type of politician that's not aspiring for the next office. Mm-hmm. And so if things work out, I'd be happy to consider it, but it's not something that I will feel like if I don't do that would be a problem.
That's something I'd like to see you run. Also, one of the Romneys, or both, Mitt and Josh Romney, and Evan McMullen, of course. I'd like to see you guys all run.
So there's you mentioned some good names, and I like Spencer Cox a lot.
Yeah.
I think he's an amazing politician, and so I could easily, if in the next governor's race, I could easily get behind and support some of those names.
Mm-hmm. Well, not for all the same office, but for different offices. Yeah. I don't really care which one, but I'd like to see all of you.
Thank you.
Office. All right. Well, thank you very much.
Yeah, it's been fun to talk to you.
Very nice to meet you.
All right.
And if you guys want to watch if you missed the beginning part of the interview, you can go back It'll be in this group, so you can watch it from the beginning. Thanks for joining us.
How do I turn this off? Finish.